boys and girls, it's been, let's see, divided by 12, multiplied by 7, carried to 3, and the root of. It's been like 2 weeks since I've done an SCP, I think, around there. But we're back in the saddle. And it's Monday. We hate Mondays. But when we have the talent on, we love Mondays. This is Stir the Pot with Dr. Cade and our very special guest, Sigma. Yes. Welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
Yes, absolutely. I see you're wearing, okay, I like to sport the old wrestling merch. You're sporting PlayStation merch. That's kind of an odd place to start, but the PlayStation merch, is there a tie-in there somewhere? Hit us with it.
Oh, I've been a long time PlayStation guy, man. I had an original PlayStation long time ago. Like I've had each one up until now because PS5s are way too expensive. And they're so hard to find. Like they're like $300 overpriced. But so yeah, I've been all the way up to PS4. I've been a PlayStation guy.
Okay, I don't mean to walk away from,
Yeah.
the set, if you will, but I'm looking for something specific because you're gonna love this. And I'm rummaging through shit, and you're gonna love this. You're a PlayStation guy, eh?
Yeah.
All right, now check this, boys and girls. I never would start off on video games ever. That's not me. Somehow we did. The PlayStation got me, but. Check this shit out. I have not played a console, a platform, if you will, like the 64s and the evolutions all the way through. I had bought a brand spanking new PlayStation, the OG, if you will, right? I haven't played a damn platform since, or a console, if you will. And I've seen the evolution. It's off the charts what the gamers have to offer to them to play and such, and the graphics and the environments and the ambiance and everything. I have in this bag, my friend, an OG PlayStation. I looked up the serial number. Okay? I looked up the serial number because that's what I do, And this, my friend, OG PlayStation. OG PlayStation right here, okay? Not only that,
Nice.
Looked up the serial number. Yet one of those OG. If I, maybe gave it a little shine. I've got a few. I've got a few $300, $400, $500 sitting around here. One controller. Look at that.
Nice.
look at
DualShock.
Right? Yeah, I did not expect to start here, boys and girls. Not at all. Wow, what an odd place.
Oh, don't get me. We could talk games the whole time, so
for me,
don't get me started.
For me personally, that's a very odd start to an STP. But that's what we like to do on STP. We don't write nothing down. We don't. Me personally, I'm probably stupid for doing it, but we have a lot of fun. Just because I don't do it, I never research, go through the files of the talent that we have on the shows. I just like to hit record and have a lot of fun. We just start speaking and see what happens. And look at that. We started with video games. Holy shit.
Yeah.
So why don't we just kind of stick on that topic? Because we bring the talent on here, my friend. This isn't my show. It may have my name on it, but this is our show. This is the fan show. So we can learn about the talent that we see live in ring at the local, events and whatnot. So we've already kind of broken out the gaming talk. Why don't we start there? Is that an incorporation of your wrestling persona, your character, if you will, video game? It's got to, because I know the guys and girls out there that game, they like to take some of those elements and bring them into wrestling. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that went into either the look or some of the personality, that type of thing. But the name Sigma specifically came from a video game, which is Mega Man X. So there's the Mega Man series, like way back on Nintendo, that they're still making to this day, like 8-bit style. But the Mega Man X came out on Super Nintendo and PlayStation, and the main villain was called Sigma. So at some point, like years and years ago, I was like, that's just a really, really cool name. And I'm also Greek. So that combined the two, because that's the Greek letter in the alphabet and everything. So I was like, well, that's kind of neat. It kind of combines my love for video games and my whole pride of being Greek and everything. So I was like, well, that's really neat. And all along, I had the idea of like, I want to paint my face. Whether I have a kind of like how Finn Balor does or Keiji Muto does or did, like a face paint character and a regular non-face paint version. And I was like, oh, I can save Sigma for the face paint. And once I started training, like a year in, once I got to really kind of like let loose or so, like I was like, all right, Sigma all the way in, face paint, I have to. So the name came from video games. Part of the character came from sci-fi, which is I'm a big sci-fi guy. Anything with imagination, like video games, comics, Muppets, like Jim Henson, all that stuff. It's so imaginative, right? Like I'm usually wearing like a Muppet shirt or something like that. But so Sigma came from I have my grandpa's appetite. He was a he probably could have gone pro boxer is what I heard, but he fought Rocky Marciano like 3 times way back when and all that. He could eat, yeah, he could eat nonstop. Just to, and I thought I eat a lot, and I would just watch him and like, oh my God, he keeps going. It's just like, so I've always had a very big appetite where like people will tell me like, man, you eat a lot. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. Like, what am I supposed to do? I know this. So that's where that part of the Sigma thing came from, of hungry for battle. And I kind of went like a Galactus route. And if anyone who's not familiar, Galactus is a like universe. He's like a Marvel cosmic villain, but he eats planets. He's usually, people think of Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer shows up to your planet and is like, hey man, my master has to eat. Sorry. And then Galactus shows up, eats the planet, whatever. So I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I think I could weave that in somehow. And then the other part of it is kind of like my love of Klingons from Star Trek, because their whole like boisterousness and battle and honor and all that stuff. So I kind of like, I was like, if Klingons met Galactus, that's kind of what Sigma is, except like, I mean, like obviously that doesn't necessarily translate in the ring all the time, but like I was like, well, like merchandise, like shirts and like pictures and whatever else comes of it. I could do some stuff with that, but yeah, so I was like, you know what though, and in a way too, like most of the time, like, right, you get like the shouty promos from the 80s, like Legion of Doom or something like that, where it's like, I'm gonna get you, bro, I'm gonna kick your ass and all that stuff. I'm like, look, no, not everyone knows what it's like to be in a real fight. So if I'm just gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna kick your butt and all that stuff, people can't always relate to that. They might be like, oh, that's cool, he said that. But when I put it all together, I was like, wait a minute though, everyone knows what it's like to be hungry. Everybody knows what it's like to want to sink your teeth into that burger or pizza, whatever that is. When you're like, dude, I've been working hard all day. I can just taste it. That's how I approach it. So when I'm like, who's hungry, or Sigma's hungry for battle, it's not only is it a food thing because I'm always hungry, but it's also the aspect of like how a Klingon would look at a good fight, or any fan looks at a matchup and goes, oh, I want that. Bret Hart versus, Stone Cold or whoever. And it's like, oh, I can't wait. That and as a wrestler too, we look at it that way, where I might see somebody on a show that I haven't seen yet or just haven't wrestled yet. And it's like, dude, I can't wait to wrestle you. I can't and so that's how Sigma looks at it. Like my opponent, the battle, the match is as good as a meal. So that's where I kind of put it all together. Sometimes people don't necessarily get it off the bat. They're like, oh, you're saying all this stuff about hungry. Where's the food? And I'm like, I just gave it to you, man. I just had that match was the food, So it's been a work in progress, but I think it's starting to come across, maybe tweaking the slogans and the monikers and stuff. But the idea, I feel like, is pretty solid. At least I think once they kind of get it, they go, oh, that makes perfect sense. I'm hungry too. I'm like, there you go.
Well, Mr. Sigma, and all of what you've just described to us, from the video game to being quite hungry, all of what you've just described to us, there's a lot to chew on, a lot to bite into, if you will.
Yes.
And we're going to kind of dissect that a little bit. We're going to cut it up and dissect it a little bit. But I like to give every episode its own little title, so it's got its flavor, its own flavor. This one, so far, it could change by maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times by the time this ends. Right now, I want to call this one Klingon plus Galactus equals Sigma. We'll see if we can pull that off because they don't like symbols and stuff. We'll try to figure that out.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
But right now, that's the first title I think I'm going to go with. Now, when you started, you were talking a year, and then you kind of did the makeup and stuff. Was there a previous name to Sigma?
No, but there was a previous character. So when I started at New England Pro Wrestling Academy in 2020 during shutdown. So started training, and we had promo classes, and one of my main mentors is Tex Benedict, who's originally from England, right? So just throwing around an idea in my head, I was like, we became really close. So I was like, oh, if we do a promo next week or whatever, I'm gonna do a scathing one as a British character and like go after him, kind of a thing. So came up with this promo, and I was like, whatever the character's name is, his last name has to be Wanker. And so I came up with Billy Wanker. So, but the idea was that we spell it different, and it's just the thick accent. So it's like, it's not Wanker, mate, it's Wanker, that type of thing. So everybody could, if it went anywhere, if I felt like doing it for a long time, if I was a bad guy, they could chant Wanker at me. I could get all mad. I had all these ideas and stuff, but so I did that. Started making some progress, like getting on. I got on the chaotic shows pretty quickly, like job matches, that type of thing. But it was during the time when we couldn't have crowds, and it was all closed. What everyone called closed arena, where only wrestlers and students could participate as the audience.
They were doing like studio tapings and different promotions.
Yes. Yeah, a few places were, like NCW was doing that as well in Rhode Island. So I had kind of branched out and flew the nest and got to go on their shows as well. And then this was May 2021. I was starting to get some steam, and then popped my Achilles tendon. Ooh. So I was out for I about six months in. I got to kind of test the water with the physical therapist. We're like, hey, go check it out, see what it's like. Your limitations. So it wasn't until like 8 to 10 months that I was able to like, get through a match or whatever. Because anyone who's had a major injury like that, like even doing one class, it's like my foot needs to rest for a week. And it sounds silly, but it's like, dude, that's how it works. It's not a muscle, it's a tendon. So it took a long time, and the surgeon going right into it was like, you realize this is like up to a year, right? And I was like, I've got to do it, So anyway, once the injury happened and all the momentum for Billy was gone, I was like, you know what though? I've aside from like a storyline I had in mind, which I'll keep just in case. I was like, you know what? I think it's time to go full into Sigma, because, Billy could be a comedy character. He could be a heel. He could be a face. The idea was that he was like an Oasis fan, like a soccer hooligan who grew up worshiping Steven Regal. So he thinks he's better than you, pinkies up and all that. Like, so I had all these little nuances, but it's hard to keep an accent in front of people, like fans. Although they did let me do commentary as Billy twice for the whole show, which was like 2 hours plus. And one of them was live in front of the audience. I had to hold the accent and stuff. So that was fun. It was fun. It's still probably on Twitch somewhere.
If I could just pause real quick and we can continue. There is a local guy around here. He uses a Australian accent around here. And I kid you not, even when we talk on the side, I'm like voice clips, or if we call each other, whatever, that son of a bitch will still use his accent. I don't know why he does it. And I laugh at him every single time, I'm sorry. I hated to interrupt.
Oh, no. Well, no, that's funny, because when people would meet me who have either seen the show at the time or whatever, and I'd be like, hey, man, what's up? I'm, Scott or whatever. And they're like, wait, you're not British? And they get upset. And they're like, dude, I thought you were really British. And I'm like, well, thank you. So, and part of it too was like, I was I put as many references as I liked of British stuff into it. So I was like, I'm kind of running out of stuff. But with Sigma, I was like, I know I can really commit to it. It can be more of, like we always say, you, but blown up. So I
Right.
was like, Sigma really is me just blown up,
Okay.
a little bit bigger. And I'm finding that is coming along even more the more I get out there. So yeah, I came back from surgery like around a year later, and was so that's like last year was literally about like getting back on my feet
Mm.
and getting back out there and having to start from zero and seeing where like if people were even interested in a new character, even though I didn't really change my wrestling style at all. But some people were just like so dead set on the other character, and to me that's like a it felt like SNL or something where it's like, yeah, but that's only just one thing in the toolbox, man. You haven't even
Mm.
seen what I got planned. And Sigma's going really well. Like I think people dig the presentation, the face paint.
Mm.
I've always been into the face paint guys, like as a kid seeing Great Muda.
Yeah.
And
Why the paint? Does it signify anything specific? Or and you mentioned it twice, and it
yeah,
seemed that that was something that was definitely going to be happening with this character
oh,
Sigma.
100%. It had to. Like growing up in like I said, Great Muda was a huge influence. Like a lot of people look at me and go, oh, like Ultimate Warrior or Sting because of the hair. And I'm like, well, yes. And Sting was a huge, huge influence. If anything, I'm more Sting than Ultimate Warrior. Although Ultimate Warrior promos are still amazing, and I love the mysticism and the like, the power of the warriors and like, and the gods and the skeletons and like, I love that stuff. Like the things he came up with, I'm like, I'm right, like in there, but I don't present that way, right? Like I don't like do like the shouty promos and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a little more like I was like, it's Sting meets Great Muda, where like, the face paint, I wrestle more like a Japanese style than like an American style, I suppose. Or I'm not like, block, punchy. I have a martial arts background. I have done like I have a black belt in karate. I've done MMA, not fighting, but I trained MMA for about a year. I did Krav Maga, which is the Israeli martial art, for 3 years.
Oh wow.
My karate teacher mixed in everything she ever learned, so I have some like kung fu in there and goju karate, like Shotokan, and lots of different stuff. So
Wow.
um, yeah, and actually the journey to martial arts is all because of Japanese wrestling. I was like, I want to get to Japan. I better start learning body control and whatnot. And so I kind of gravitated towards some of the kickers. I like them a lot. So I was like, what makes sense. My buddy's mom teaches martial arts and yoga, and like I was like, there we go. So body control, and now I have this whole element in my arsenal that a lot of people don't have, which
Mhm.
makes stories that I can tell a bit stronger or
Right.
different. Like my matches come out different because I can do this martial arts based wrestling if I want to.
You were mentioning the disciplines and some of
Hmm.
the trainers and such. You mentioned a trainer in wrestling. Where did you start training in wrestling specifically?
So I started at New England Pro Wrestling Academy. That's that
Okay.
chaotic wrestling. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
started learning under the first couple months was under Scotty Slade and
Okay.
Darren Benedict or Tex Benedict.
Hmm.
Um, and then learned Chase Del Monte and Max Smashmaster run the school. I learned from them a lot, like especially I love the way Smashmaster thinks about wrestling. We're from a similar era, and we both have the face paint, which for me means a lot more now because I trained under him for a long time and stuff, and we're both into like X-Men and all that fun stuff. And
Hmm.
but yeah, so I trained there for about 2 years, and then or 2 years and a bit, and then I switched over to at Lockup Wrestling now because that's for me it's closer to home, and
Okay.
um, that makes a big deal. I was pretty far away from Nepwa, which over time kind of adds up, and life happens and stuff like that. So
One way travel for you to go to the New England Pro.
about 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we talk about we always talk about on SCP the perseverance of becoming a singles wrestler.
Yeah.
May it be family, may it be missed things at
Hmm.
school for your kids or birthdays or
Yep.
that kind of stuff. But here we're talking to train. It's 2 hours one way.
Mhm.
That's one of these sacrifices that the talents make in their own personal lives to
Yeah.
that they take away from their families. That's that evening to go train, and
Mhm.
that next evening to go train. If it's 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, boys
Yeah.
and girls, we talk about that all the time on here. This is a perfect example. 2 hours one way to go train. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, it's true, and that's not even the shows. Like once you start getting on shows, now it's like
Right.
you might be wrestling Friday night, Saturday night, and that could be, I wrestle a lot in ETWA, which is this later this month. We'll be literally at the Canadian border in Vermont.
Wow.
So you could be all the way up. Like for me, that's about 5 hours. So it's like, okay,
Wow.
5 hours this way, and then maybe you're in Rhode Island the next day, and it's like I got to go all the way down. And so yeah, there's a balance. Everyone has to figure out what their balance is, right? So for me,
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to be a bit closer to home on the regular and save some of those long trips for matches.
Right.
So
No.
that was a choice I had to make. So
Okay. Um, you were talking about, your style and the
mhm,
disciplines that you have underneath you. Obviously, that those are great tools to have as
mhm.
you persevere to become a singles wrestler. But you talked about, I don't know, like 32 different disciplines. How long have you been doing martial arts, my friend? Holy cow.
um, gosh, like probably like 15 years, something like that.
Okay.
I was training at my buddy's house where his mom had she completely redid the garage into this awesome dojo. So I trained with her for years and years because it was like we were in the same town. Actually, I live right near now at the house I found. But so I did that, and I did I found Krav Maga kind of through the police academy, that type of thing. I was a police officer for years. We can get into that a little bit. Um, I even taught a lot of martial arts. I taught like sell it was Krav Maga based, but it was defensive tactics at the department I worked at and stuff. So
Okay.
um, there's a lot that goes into it. Like you said, the discipline helped me a lot, like confidence building. And it's just like anything, it's a different kind of workout. You really do get a different feel for your body. Um, like that's why I always like anytime if I'm at a school and there's a new student or I'm on a show with somebody, and even if they're not new, I'm like, well, what's your background? Do you have an athletic background? And they're like, well, yeah, I did this and this. Like, okay, why don't you use it? Like put it into your stuff. Because at the very least, like the people who've already done athletics of some kind are familiar with their own body, how it moves, how it, like your own dimensions and like getting comfortable in your own skin, that kind of thing. So, and martial arts is funny because there's a lot of things you do that you don't normally move that way. Like even a punch is really a full body thing. And then wrestling's even funnier in a way because a lot of the stuff I learned, I kind of had to unlearn in a way. Like I would protect my neck a lot while getting certain moves on me, and they're like, "No, we got to see your face." And I'm like, "This is undoing years of training." But no, I've come to a good place with it. But like, yeah, there's certain things where like early on, I was like, getting tackled to the ground. My other training was kicking in where I wasn't leaving both my feet and all that stuff to protect myself better. And I was like, it was like rewiring my brain a little bit.
The transition. I was actually going to kind of lead into that as you were talking
Yeah.
on this subject. The transition in order to, excuse me, in order to pull back from your kicks, your punches, your swings, your
Mm.
velocity that you're
Yeah.
creating in your body and receiving, like you've already
Hmm.
described. The transition must have been kind of awkward in a way and trying to get used to a little bit because like you're saying you've learned these disciplines over the course of the past decade and a half, and now
Hmm.
you're doing this, which is a totally different discipline, if you will.
It's interesting because there's, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. I think it was more beneficial, and it translates really well more than like if I was, if I played volleyball, if I played baseball. So having the martial arts is a really good background to have to get into wrestling. Um, but there were some things, like you said, that I did have to learn a bit more how hard is too hard. Because even in wrestling terms, I'm sorry, in martial arts terms, I kick like a mule, and that's why that's why I really lean into the kicks as my character because even in martial arts, striking is what I kind of specialized in. But yeah, so there's like, you won't see me do, I don't like, because we know what head injuries do nowadays rather than like way back when. I don't like people, some people throw out head kicks a lot, and I'm like, they're very dangerous, dude. It takes one little thing and you could, fry somebody. So, and knowing how hard I can kick if I want to, or if like in the moment, if for some reason my control just slips a little bit. So I tend not to go, even though I can kick high, I don't like to kick people in the head because it's just too dangerous, But like, yeah, the first few matches I had when I was getting out there, um, I did have to learn how to like not throw it wrestling style, but like I said, how hard is too hard? Because I think the first few times I felt really bad, like I was kicking people too hard. And it wasn't like I meant to, but like I just wanted to make solid contact and get that sound because I don't want to be I don't need to make a clap sound because my kicks do it for me, So
Not a fan of the legs. Not a fan of the leg slap.
No, I'm old school like that. I mean, I give people a lot of grief. I'm like, what are you doing that for? Like, but at the same time too, it does come from the martial arts in me where I want things to look as realistic as possible. So if I'm throwing an elbow strike, why would I be doing this when I should be like at least something covering up here? My arm should not be down at my side. So and make it count, man. If some people focus too much on this and then this becomes wild. And it's like, dude, you might hurt somebody because you're too focused on the sound, and how come yours sound better than mine and I hit harder than you? Saying yours are harder? All right.
At this point, you seem to be having a lot of fun in your wrestling career.
I am, yeah. And so like if last year is about getting back on my feet and kind of finding my place, I guess, like getting back out there and stuff, like this year, it wasn't like a New Year's resolution, but like it was more like a almost like a life lesson. Like, what's this year's lesson in wrestling for me? And I think the goal / lesson is like leveling up. So I always want to be improving. I'm not like super hard on myself, but it's always like, okay, what could have gone better in this little match? Or like, I used to beat myself up a lot when I was younger, like mentally, like, oh, I messed this up, I messed that up, and you focus on that. And over the years, it's like, okay, well, yeah, that didn't go right, but look how much I improved over here. I didn't even think about this, So this year's about leveling up, like not only showing growth in the character, in the moves, and in my like experience, confidence level, but like I want to show that I can hang. I want to show that I can be a bigger part of all these companies that I've worked for. Like I just had a 30-minute match with Sonny Defarge from the like Chikara area. He's based out of Ohio now, but he's had the ETWA belt for like 350 days, or no, almost 400 days now. And like I challenged him, and we went. It took 30 minutes for him to beat me. And well, he had interference to help him, but I showed that I can be in that position, and that's what this year's about. It's like, I've only been doing this a couple years now, and then, minus the injury time, but I feel like I'm in a place where if I have some higher tier opponents that even if they have to like lead me a little bit, I can at least hang on and be right there with you. I had a match the other day, what was it? Last weekend with Ryan Mooney, the Rabbit Honey Badger. He's been trained by Delirious and Cheeseburger. He's at like Wrestling Open, and he's had some Ring of Honor experience and stuff. And we had a really good match that I was very happy with. And he did a great job, like helping me in the ways I needed, like especially with I was having trouble focusing that day. Like that's some of the things I deal with from the police fallout of I have PTSD. So good days and bad days type of thing. And so there's some days. So anyone who ever wrestles me, if I'm like, hey, I'm having a day where I can't focus, or a trainer or something, it is what it is. I'll just be like, I might have to ask you to repeat yourself type of thing, where I'm like, hold on, what does that mean? Like, okay, can we simplify it? But he did awesome. We had really good chemistry. And that was at Green Mountain Wrestling. And I think their style is right up my alley, because they want like hard hitting, like athletic wrestling. And we had that kind of match, and the fans are booing them for a while. But then by the end, because we were both trying so hard to win, they were kind of cheering. It was like almost like a 50-50. And I was like, this is.
Yeah, but we talk about evolution,
Yeah.
maybe the character of a talent or a whole revamp. Obviously, many people do, using Chris Jericho as an example. I mean,
Yes.
he's done this and this and that and that, but he makes it work every time. He kind of
Yeah.
rejuvenates himself, if you will. The evolution of wrestling and wrestling fan alike. Me personally, give me story, give me character, and give me good in ring. I'm yours forever. Okay.
Yeah.
The evolution, I like to boo the bad guys and cheer for the good guys. The evolution you've just described right there, my friends. And I
Yeah.
know we want to applaud the athleticism. And I know we want to applaud, some will say the performance. But damn it, there's a good guy and there's a bad
Yeah.
guy. Can we please cheer and boo? And I'm not saying don't cheer or applaud for a guy that doesn't deserve it athletically. Let's keep it for the end. Please, let's keep the
Yeah. Good
the
point.
struggle for good guy, bad guy
Mm-hmm.
throughout. That's me personally, okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm an old school. Like Don Morocco, that's my go-to. All right. And we're
Oh,
talking
okay. Yeah.
that's way back. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was born 70. I had to remember. So I was born 70, coming up in wrestling since I was 5. So
Wow.
I'm the old school stories, in your face, hard hitting, and characters. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
From through the 70s to the 80s into the 90s, characters throughout those decades. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're kind of losing that right now. There's a lot of similar. This guy looks like that
Yes.
guy. This girl looks like that
Yes.
girl. Sigma stands out. He's got a character. He has a backstory. When you started describing Sigma, I go, to me, inside, I'm already saying, I love this effing guy because he has a backstory to his character. All right. Could you just kind of continue with what I'm speaking on, please?
No, I agree with. I know exactly what you mean because I see that a lot. Like here's a little insider info on how I look at wrestling too. Like going into it, like I kind of look at it almost not like a video game, but like, okay, if I was going to make me in a video game, what moves would I use? Right. Like over the years, I'd create my own character and like, oh, I like these wrestlers are my favorites. I want to use his move here, there. But a lot of people are doing all the same things. In a game we play, one of my trainers and I kind of like started doing it, and then a couple of my friends and I do it. We do move of the night. So we kind of pick like it's almost like a pool. Like, okay, I think the move of the night is going to be a senton. And they might be, oh, I think it's going to be like a discus, whatever, right? And then we just watch all the matches and we try to see how many are in each match because that's really important. Like you said, like standing out, being different. And that was one thing that Smash Master at Nepwa always talked about. No, there are certain things that are just fundamental, right? Like headlocks and
Right.
whatever. But like, how can we do even those things differently? Let's not just kind of regurgitate what we see on TV or, hey, I just want to do these moves tonight. Like, what's the story? The story is going to make you stand out. Like you said, my match with Dan Champion, or Johnny Pierce, like 6'5", 270 something, should be completely different than if it was against, like Owen Brody, who's a similar size to me, or somebody much smaller than me, whoever that might be. Like, you might see me bust out a lot more power moves in that match because that's my advantage, right? Like, it should be like, okay, I'm wrestling a quicker, like, not lucha per se, but like a quicker, athletic, like cruiserweight type guy. Okay, if I give him too much distance, he's dangerous. So I might want to, I keep him like under my grasp and on the ground. Whereas somebody who's much bigger than me, like Johnny, I'm not going to want to stay in close. Like if he gets a hold of me, I might get chokeslammed. So that's the thing is a lot of people are doing the same moves where like I have this move, like list of moves that it's like, okay, they're forbidden to me right now. It's like super kicks, discus, anything. So like a 3-6, like a spin, elbow, lariat, like that type of stuff. Because a lot of people are doing the same thing. Yeah.
A discus,
Although I do, I do a 360 axe kick, so I don't know. I don't know if that's discus or not, but um, but no, like, like pump, there's like pump kick, bicycle kick, like kind of like Kenny Omega knees, that type of thing. Where I'm like, okay, a lot of people are doing these, and that's fine. So I just won't, and I'll kind of focus on what I do. And I kind of, there's part of me that wishes people would do that a little bit more. Like, hey, what makes you different? What makes you you? You know, if you have that amateur wrestling background from high school, why don't you incorporate it a little bit? It doesn't mean you don't have to be like the Steiner brothers, but like, or Kurt Angle, where you're like completely just like, I'm going to keep you on the mat and do the referee's position and all that. But it's like, dude, you could still use it. Like, do it in transitions. And like, because the way your background, like I said earlier, was like, you get used to how your body moves. So somebody who's from like a judo background might move differently than I do, because I don't have that experience, but they, you know what I mean? So it's like, dude, that makes you different. That's back to the food. And this is why I love that reference, is that's a little spice. That's another little bit of flavor that you have that I might not. What's your recipe? Here's mine. Like all this martial arts, all these,
all of this time, what we've been describing, my friend, almost, not the whole 36 minutes and 4 seconds, not the whole 36 minutes, but for a good portion, the topics that we've been touching on and everything that we've been speaking about, pretty much, that's one of those major tools in the toolbox called psychology, my man. All of that stuff we just been talking about. You, personally, from fan to wrestler, I can see that you have a grasp on psychology.
Thank you.
Getting that does not come easy to a lot of the talents that try to become a wrestler. Was it something difficult for you?
No. I mean, I think, my brother and I were lucky enough to watch a lot of like WCW growing up. So we got to watch like Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, like that whole batch of guys, Steve Regal, all that stuff. So I feel like, I don't know if I like, because especially walking into wrestling, I knew a lot about it. And my brother and I like really did a lot. Like we kind of focused on the wrestlers a lot. And I was very lucky in the town I grew up in on public access. There was a show where it was called Toke on Retsiden, and they had a talk show called The Wrestling Scene. It was two guys, Great Riki and Dan Ginnity. Dan Ginnity's he's well known in the tape trader groups back when, because he had access to like Japan and all this stuff. So his stuff was always high quality footage, but they were putting on shows of just Japanese wrestling. And I don't mean like when you say Japanese, they're like, oh, death matches. And it's like, no, dude, this is like, they were showing like relatively current and then even classic stuff like New Japan, All Japan Women, Noah, All Japan, 01, like you name it, Michinoku Pro, all that stuff. So I was lucky to have a source that was airing like every week, and I just recorded all the videos. And it was kind of like when you already think about it a certain way, but then you have someone to fine tune it. They were pointing out a lot of things. They weren't really trying to get themselves over at all. They were trying to share their love of wrestling and why they loved Japanese wrestling so much. And it resonated with me because right around that time is when WCW died. And that would have been my like go-to, like if I had to go anywhere at the time, it would have been like, oh, so then all of a sudden I had this source of Japanese stuff. And that was a huge influence on me. It saved my love of wrestling. And I was already familiar with a bunch of the Japanese wrestlers because of WCW, like Liger and Muda and Masachono and stuff like that. But so yeah, like watching that stuff and them pointing some things out, but I already realized I kind of looked at it that way because, I would watch certain, like, I remember when I was first getting into it, like thinking about training, I was like, I'm going to watch like SmackDown and take notes. And I remember a lot of my notes were, this makes no sense. like, why is this happening? And like, so for me, I agree with you where it's like, for me, storylines are great and all. Like, I'm not so much of a like, oh, you stole my girlfriend, you scuffed my shoe, you like that stuff. I'm much more like, almost like to me, the matchup alone is like, ooh, yes. And then if like, obviously if things happen along the way and like, whether it's interference or like a double count out, whatever it is, right? And it keeps going and going and you're like, oh, okay, they're building up to something in a couple months. Awesome, I'm in. That's how I look at it. And that's the type of stuff, that's the type of wrestling and stories I want to tell. I want Sigma especially to be one of my goals walking through the door into the wrestling world was, if I'm going to do this, I'm the type where I just want to do it to the best of my ability. So no matter who I'm with, let's have the best match possible. And that doesn't mean like we have to kill ourselves out there, or drop each other on our heads, or like let's go for that 5 stars. But like, no, let's just, if we're going to tell a story, let's tell the best version of that story. Let's, like, I want to try to bring out the best in my opponents out there, and highlight their strengths. And I hope they do that for me too. But like, I kind of looked at like Bret Hart and like Jushin Liger, and the guys that were like just really good for just decades. And it's like, you could ask about any wrestler, right? And like, oh, who were their best matches? And it's like, oh, okay. Oh, Stone Cold, his bet, like, this guy, Bret, this guy, and then it's like, oh, who's this guy from Japan? Who are his best matches? Oh, like this Liger, and their names always came up, right? I want to be that. That's like one of my goals. It's like, oh, I want people, no matter where I am, if it's just around here, New England, whatever, it's like, oh man, who, like, oh, who's this guy's, like, some of his better matches. Oh, and like my name keeps coming up, because I just want, that's what I want to do, man. Like, I just want to bring the audience into it and make them, because I know what makes me happy about wrestling is like, I don't want to know who's going to win. Like, I don't want to see it coming a mile away. Where
Yes.
it's like, oh, they're obviously like, oh, like when Triple H came back and Jericho had both belts, I was like, oh, come on, man, you're giving it away like 3 months ahead. We know Jericho's not keeping this. And so I don't want that with my matches, where it's like, just like, oh, Sigma's not winning tonight, or he's definitely winning tonight. I want them to, actually, I don't know. Some people might not get this reference, but I look at it like a full field soccer match, right? I'm a big soccer fan, like, like Premier League and stuff. But like, when you watch a soccer match, it's a battle for territory. It's like back and forth. And then tension starts to build, right? If it's your team and they haven't been on the offense in a while, and like, oh, come on. And then they start to build that offense and they start to get in the other player's territory. You're like, yes, right? And then like that tension's coming and they finally get that shot off at goal. That's like 1, 2. And then if the shot hits, 3, or if it misses, right? It's like your guy was trying to go for the pin, they kicked that, right? So that's kind of what I'm going for. And I guess the other goal too is to have that kind of persona and that credibility where, like, if when people see me on the how I used to look at like Bret or Eddie or Jericho, I'm like, ooh, that match. That's the match to wait for on this card, right? That I hope I get to that point. And or like if somebody's putting out an open challenge and I walk through the curtain, everyone's like, uh-oh, like Sigma's going to get you, man. He's going to eat you, like, or, whatever. Like, you're in my world. That's kind of the vibe I'm going for, because I have that martial artsy background where it's like, dude, we're in, I'm dangerous, whether I'm good or bad. It's like, that's the vibe I'm going for, where like you have to kind of wrestle. Not my style. You don't have to meet me there, but you're in my world, because that's what's coming. Like, I'm not just going to you're not just going to throw me around, or you're not just going to like, do the same old thing, like that. Because if I can I would rather, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not dictate, but like, I want to make sure I put the match like toward, like I said, your strengths and mine. How do we meet up? Because how would our match look like? Because like I said earlier, like, I'm not just gonna have the same match with everybody, because that wouldn't make any sense. Like, if someone's faster than me, if someone's stronger than me, if someone's bigger, smaller, like different background, or like different style, or if we're really like blood feud right now and technical wrestling's out the window, then that's a different story, and that's, like you said earlier, like, story's paramount. And I 100% agree. Like, I want people to remember these stories, or at least the feeling of it. Like, wow, that match was really good. Like, I had no clue who was going to win. And then it came out, or whatever it is, right? So,
My friend, boys and girls alike, he speaks about wrestling with passion, with vigor, with feeling, with inflection. My man, Sigma, loves wrestling. Yes, he's one of those guys. He's one of those talents that really just loves wrestling. You have, obviously love for many other arts.
mm-hmm.
How does one find time to fit in a wrestling career the other arts that you enjoy? May it be reading a comic, or movies, or whatever,
Yeah.
because it's a difficult. Not only, boys and girls, is it difficult to maintain a wrestler's diet, lifestyle, training, gym work, in ring, all of that. You've got to live it. You know, there's a cheat day. There's a cheat day for a reason because
Yes.
they're training and they're doing their thing.
Yeah.
How do you find time around just that alone besides the shoot job or whatever you've got going on, my
hmm
man?
It's hard. Like, and that's a super important thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, at least where I've been, like, or at my level, right? Like, and if I guess if anyone can learn from me, that's something I've been really trying to put forward is like balance, mental health. Like, yes, we all want to get out there on as many shows as possible, but like, you know, everyone has a different, like, when your cup overflows, right? Like a break, not a break point, but like how much is too much, right? Some people can work like every weekend, and um, like all 3 days and just go, go, go. I know for me that can catch up to me. So I do try to take off, time. I like video games do help me relax. I do enjoy that a lot. Like, um, I hanging out with friends, or like I love to laugh. So like any like cartoons, man. I was watching Dexter's Lab this morning. So like, anything that, like I said, like things with imagination, and comics have always been a very good escape for me, even as a little kid, and way before the MCU and stuff, like kind of transporting myself to that other world. But no, it's a lot because it's like you have if you have your job, you have training, which is almost like a second job, and then you have matches, which is like another kind of with that other job. And then it's like, wait, but then I got to lift, I have to exercise, I have to eat right, I have to watch tapes, I have to, you know, some people are like a lot better at social media than I am. So they might be like trying to film like sketches and shows and podcasts and you name it. So everyone has their own amount. And so for me, like, I try to balance is really important. Like I said, PTSD from being a police officer for years. I'm getting a service dog in a month,
Oh,
or at least a puppy that I'm going to train up to service dog.
okay.
Hopefully, he can become part of the act. I would love that, but if not, no big deal. So for me, that's like I know that's going to help me a lot, because I can get when something I struggle with is things can become overwhelming, where it's like even just around like some days it can even be hard for me to like leave the house, and that sounds silly, but it can be just like today's one of those days, dude. I can't focus, or I get stuck in fight or flight. So it's called hypervigilance from always being on as a police officer. So
Wow.
so that's something I deal with. So mental health is super important. I know a lot of people say it, but it's totally true. Like, I wish going forward that maybe some wrestling schools would talk to their students about that, like, as just doesn't have to be a whole class or anything, but like, hey, think about like
Hmm.
how much is too much, or are you overdoing it, or like, if you aren't overdoing it, keep going, dude. But like, figure out your own balance. That's huge. And everyone needs to figure out what helps them kind of wind down, because at some point you do have to take a little bit of a break
Yeah.
from wrestling or your shoot job or whatever. So it's like, there's some nights I'm like, I should be watching wrestling, but I'm like, man, I gotta just chill. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Um, we like to talk support system on
Yeah.
STP. May it be a sibling or a parent, grandparent,
hmm
foster parent, no matter what it is, your peers. That seems to be a common denominator when we
Yes.
talk support system. Why don't you talk to us, the fans, first off, how important, because we are on this topic of mental health, which we always speak
Yeah.
about in STP.
hmm
Talk about how important support system is, especially in the endeavor of becoming a wrestler,
Oh
because I
yeah.
mean, holy crow. And who do you have for a support system?
Yeah. I mean, wrestling, it is a community, right? Like you're not just, it is your own journey. Like, everybody walks their own path. Like, and right now my journey is parallel with a lot of people, but mine might veer off over here. But support systems are huge, because with this being a passion project for a lot of people, the um, the drive and the want, and then like you can kind of get impatient. You're like, why am I not there now? And like, the cliche, not cliche, but the saying, like, life, it's about the journey, and that's true. Um, so for me, like, finding positivity in as many places as possible is paramount. Like, if everyone has their off days, everyone has their bad days, like, or things in their personal life, and or whatever it is, maybe the travel and you barely slept, so you're a little grumpy today. Okay, we all have that. But like, I try to just stay with as much positivity as possible. Like, I don't, constructive criticism is one thing, but I'm not like, I've always avoided like toxicity where I can. So I try to bring positivity because it's just more fun that way. But having positive people around you who are motivated, who are trying to elevate you, uplift you, instead of drag you down or jealous of you or whatever it is. And it could be just like, well, dude, like, I'm working my butt off. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should have done this and this, or whatever it is. But it's like when you're with people who are just like enthusiastic, and it's give and take, right? So a lot of my friends, like I mentioned Johnny Pierce earlier, he's really good. We talk a lot. Vegan Keegan's one of my closest friends in the business. Darley Decimo, Anthony Green's been extremely good for me. I don't know if I'd be this far along if it weren't for him. Just, it's kind of like one of those things where he invited me to a show, and then all of a sudden opportunities start growing and branching out from there. So having people, I think having people at different levels around you is good too, where yes, it's great to have a lot of like, you're going to have probably more friends that are at your level than otherwise, but having a few people you can turn to for advice, who've been there, and having people who have life experience is good too. I didn't start at 21, so it's like I was a little older than a few of the students, so it's like, well, I have some life experience coming in here and stuff like. But having that, like, having people you can reach out to in wrestling is huge, because you're going to be riding with these folks and seeing them at the same shows and stuff. So you'll figure that out. But like, and then having it outside is huge too, because while it's great that wrestlers are in it too, so they understand what you're saying, whereas somebody who's outside of it may not get some of the nuances of what it's like to be in it. But then having people outside is really good too, because they might give you a different perspective or can help you with stuff that's not related to wrestling. So for me, I talk to my brother a lot. I'm visiting my dad in Florida this week, and hopefully getting some training while I'm down there, because there's a school near his house. And then, I have a couple therapists that I talk to for the stuff that I need to deal with. And then, like I said, I try to, like, I hang out with my friends. A buddy of mine and we watch Stardom, which is a Japanese wrestling promotion. We hang out about once a week and watch and try to get caught up like every week on Stardom.
How do you watch Stardom regularly?
They have a streaming service that my buddy signed up for. So it's called Stardom World. It's like New Japan World. So that one's our favorite right now, though, is Stardom. They have some of the best consistency and storytelling in wrestling right now.
That's all female Stardom?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, they're very good. Yeah, a lot of people might underestimate Joshi wrestling, or at least women's wrestling. Like, I watch All Japan Women's on YouTube all the time. That's such a good resource, because normally it seems what happens is like the women come up with something and then the men steal it. So like, certain moves came around like, oh, where'd you learn that? And it's like, did you come up with that? It's like, no, a chick in Japan did, like 95. So and their style's so different, man. Like, there's just something about it where, like, All Japan Women, the bell rings and one of them bum rushes the other, and then it's off to the races, and then it slows down for a bit, and then it's off to, because they're smaller. So
Mercedes Moné was the former champion very recently, was she not?
Yes. Yep. She had the new IWGP. I don't know if they call it women's title or what, but she had it.
I believe
she was doing.
I believe it's
yeah. Yes. Yeah. She had a few matches over there. I believe she has a few more coming. So that's really, I like how she's bringing a lot of eyes on it that wouldn't be there otherwise. Kind of like how, in a way, Kenny Omega did, the last couple, or AJ Styles, because I've been watching New Japan since like the early 2000s. And like, most people didn't know what it was unless you like really knew what it was, so it's become much more of a global thing, which is like, really cool. So it's like casually people are talking about like New Japan. You're like, this is weird, man. I was one of the only guys back when on like message boards and stuff, checking the news.
It's almost like being one of the kids that are trying to get wrestling fan friends that can't find them, and like everybody's WWE
Yeah.
and what have you, and you're like,
Yes.
but but guys, check this out. Just check this out. I'm telling you.
Oh yeah, man. I was waving the WCW flag when other people like they were like, that stinks. I'm like, no way, man. You don't get it. You just don't get it.
When I posed the question of what's the long-term goal as a wrestler, most of the time it's usually the WWE because they've been the juggernaut for
Yep.
years and years and years. But it's a different, as we've spoken, it's the evolution of wrestling. It's a
Yeah.
different animal out there. And I'm going to go out on a very small limb. Correct
Okay.
me if I'm wrong. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, though. We're going to go out on a small limb. And I'm going to say that the long-term goal in wrestling to, be on that big stage, the platform, would be something like a New Japan Wrestling, something in those realms, if you will.
Yeah.
Am I correct on saying
How on earth did you guess?
that?
Yeah. No, and that has been my goal for like 20 years. When I found that like the source that had the Japanese wrestling, where I was like, this is like mind blowing, that like they wrestle and have these good matches that aren't just I warn people sometimes that like, dude, if you start, and this is more American wrestling starting to catch up, but for a while it's like, hey man, if you start watching Japanese stuff, I'm just saying, like, you might start losing a taste for the things you thought were really good. And like, wow, but anyway, yeah. So Japanese wrestling, Japan is number one on the on my goal. I've always been a big Ring of Honor fan, especially before, I call it like the golden era, when like before everybody got snatched up, when you had like Danielson and Jimmy Rave and
Tyler Black?
Claudio.
Yeah, Tyler Black was a
Tyler
champ.
Black, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Nigel McGuinness, Samoa Joe. Like my brother and I were like front row for Ring of Honor shows for like, geez, like 4 or 5 years. During that time frame, we watched like Morishima defend the belt a bunch of times, and Shingo Takagi was over here, and like just that style has seemed to have dissipated, and that breaks my heart. And that's kind of the vibe I'm trying to bring back anywhere I can, is like that technical wrestling where it's like you don't let your guard down at first and just get into like doing the fight choreography that some people love so much. And because that style resonates so much with me, where the ability to tell stories, and that how you match up against somebody is like so key. And so yeah, Ring of Honor would be awesome. Like that would just be like a good bringing it full circle kind of a feeling.
So you've talked Ring of Honor and you've talked New
Uh-huh.
Japan Wrestling. Now, if I'm not mistaken, for a couple, maybe even a few years before ROH kind of poofed, they were doing a thing called War of the Worlds within
Yes.
under the ROH umbrella, with New Japan
Yep.
guys coming over and being part of their shows. That's correct, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is that something, as a as a Japanese, actually, I should say more of a Japanese wrestling fan more than the American style, because you like that the strong style, if you
Yeah.
will. That's kind of where
Yeah,
it
like to
comes
leave it
from.
all in the ring. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Now, when you're seeing this happen for the first time, are you into this? Are you saying
Oh
like,
yeah.
what the hell is going on? I mean, what are your feelings as a fan going into something like that?
It was really cool because I went to a few of those actually. So my friend and I did like a 24-hour trip down to from Massachusetts to Philadelphia just to see the ROH New Japan show.
Oh,
Came back the same day, and like it was like 26 hours or something like that. It was a long ride, but
wow.
I really like, especially as a like life, like a really long term Japanese wrestling fan, to be able to see them live. That's what it was. It was like, wow, man, Shinsuke's here, and like, holy crap. And then when you combine it with like how much we loved Ring of Honor, like to see it there was really cool. Like I actually saw in 2004, I went to see my first Ring of Honor show, which had Jushin Liger on it. And that was him versus Brian Danielson, which is like, it doesn't get any better.
Wow.
I mean, like we didn't get to see, because I think might have been in New York, but like then like Joe Kobashi type of thing. But no, the Ring of Honor New Japan shows was great, because I think it exposed people to a lot of different to New Japan, especially the Japanese style, their wrestlers, and they're very high caliber. Their training is crazy over there. Like it's the entry level is very high. You have to like the fitness tests you have to pass and like the drills they do and all that, or at least back when, from my understanding. But yeah, man, like those shows are great. Because it was like you had a lot of workhorses, like the Briscoes were wrestling Shinsuke and Okada. Like that's wild. And we saw it live, like Kevin Steen, we got to see him wrestle Shinsuke, and that was amazing,
The names, of past, not that far in the past, but that we see on a much different stage. And you must, at this point with Shinsuke Nakamura, you just must be disgusted. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, for real. I mean, from what he was to what he is nowadays, you must see him on, the WWE TV and be like, son of a bitch. I remember when he was just so effing good, And now he's obviously he can do whatever he can physically, athletically, and all of that.
Yeah.
But they tone him down and they make him a character instead of making him this athletic, crazy Japanese wrestler, because that's exactly what he was back in the day over at New Japan Wrestling.
Yeah, it's on. Like I haven't seen Shinsuke in years. I haven't watched WWE in a long time. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea. But like, I mean, some of the NXT shows were wild. But no, it's like when yes. But when you watch like one of the things that got me heavily back into Japanese wrestling was Shinsuke, because I remember I forget exactly how it happened, but I remember one day I was on YouTube and I was just like, you know what? I wonder what like New Japan's doing right now, because it kind of like the show I was doing with my friends who were doing public access had stopped, and like it had been a couple years since I was watching it, and I was like, I wonder what they're doing. And the first match I watched was Shinsuke versus Hiroki Goto for the Intercontinental title, and I was just like, oh my gosh, man! Like Shinsuke's completely different now. Like he's not so like he has like all this personality he didn't have, and he became like one of my all-time favorites. I had seen him back in the early 2000s when he beat Tenzan and when he was fighting like MMA still partially and all that. But then like he had this whole new vibe about him, which was like, dude, this guy is on another level. And like you said, what's wild is he has some of him, and I think Asuka have some of the most universal charisma that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
No matter who it is, if they never even knew, all they know is they came from Japan, they'll watch him, but oh my gosh, these two are so cool. And it's like they had that, and then like they have it in NXT, and then something happens when they go to the main roster, and I'm like, dude, it's just not the same. And that's kind of how I feel. I'm just like, you know what, man, it's just not the same. It's not for me. Like I await your return, Shinsuke, when you come back to somewhere where you'll wrestle more like yourself. And so that's what, like, usually when someone signs there, I'm like, well, good for you, man, but like I will await your return. That's just, I'll put it that way, I guess. So because when you see the caliber of matches they were having, like especially Shinsuke was, man, I even feel like he was robbed of New Japan glory the past like 6 years he was there before WWE, man. It's like if you took things when they were organically happening, you could have put the belt on him and had him do like a run where he was in his like some people say their final form, if you will, but like their most iconic version of themselves at his top level. And they didn't. They just kept giving him the what was seen as a slightly lesser title over and over. And I feel like that might have been part of one of the reasons he left. He's like, well, I guess I'm just not Okada, or so. That's my take. But
that was the IC championship, correct? The IC championship.
Yes, yeah. He would win it. He would lose it. He'd win it right back. He would lose it. He'd win it right back. And I'm like, dude, he's the best one here. Put it, like it seemed like, the fan, like it was the most organic thing. And then things kept happening where it was like, oh, okay, they're just going in the other direction with the guy who's had the belt like 7 times recently. But yeah, like, man, I just love good wrestling. So it's like when you see somebody who's just like if their trading card would have all the maximum stats almost, you're like, man, this guy's firing on all cylinders. Let's do it. And then, they either don't like go with the momentum, and that's any wrestling league where like, like Rusev Day was like, man, when
Oh
he
my-
was when he was undefeated as
oh
a
my
villain,
goodness.
and then he came in on the tank, and I was like, dude, like this is the perfect chance for him to beat somebody like Cena, and that'll elevate him, and he'll just be off. And they didn't, and then he made himself as megastar with Rusev Day, and they went no, and they switched him.
Not believe it. Unbelievable.
It's like, just go with the flow, man. The flow is coming. Ride the wave, like.
A few years back, the whole family came in the ring and they said that they were going to start listening to us. Son of a bitch, they haven't started yet. I wish they would at least.
I did hear from my friends. I heard, because I don't have cable or like a lot of streaming things. I have a few, but a lot of my friends who were keeping tabs with WWE were like, this Triple H era got real good, like real fast.
It did, yes.
But then it took I guess from what they were saying, it kind of took like a step back or two. But
yes,
because like I've met a couple WWE alumni at this point in my career. Like I've done a couple of Fandango. I've met Fandango a few times. I did a seminar with him, and like I trained out and had a couple matches at Freelance Wrestling in Chicago. And on one of the days, like my first trip out there, Mustafa Ali walked into the building, and I was like, and they warned me like he might be, but then like
now,
I was like, no way, and had to wrestle in front of him, like no big deal.
Mustafa Ali, previous to the NXT pickup, and they grabbed him. If I'm not mistaken, he was their longest reigning champion at Freelance before he went.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And he, even like watching him even in training, it's like, man, this guy's good, so smooth. But yeah, it was just so cool to see him and get some advice from him for a little bit, like when I could actually pick his brain a little bit. But like, yeah, he watched the match that me and one of their they put me and a student on the show, on the pre-show, and it was a student's first match, so they trusted me with that, that was a huge confidence boost for me. But
nice.
Yeah, Mustafa saw it, and like he actually demanded to see it, which I thought was funny. He's like, I want to see that match tonight. And we were like, oh boy, we might be in for it. But no, it went well. So he gave us some good feedback, and like, telling stories to the whole class and stuff. It was just really cool. People on that level, and they still kind of a lot of them still see it the way we do, but they're just in front of more people.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot more pressure, I suppose. But
I'll give you a prime example. Very recently, just this past weekend, Creative Pro Wrestling, they had a homecoming of MJF.
I saw that.
And he went against Leo Sparrows. I don't know if you're familiar with one Leo Sparrows. He's a vegetarian. Yes. He likes to throw spinach and shit out there.
Yes, my buddy Keegan is tag team with him in a couple places because they're both they're vegan. So they do. Keegan's a vegan, and then so they do all the green stuff. It's great.
Leo Sparrow. I have a place in my heart for Leo Sparrow because he treated my nephew. We've never met him except one time live, and he was doing merch for some of the talent. And he just took my nephew in. My nephew at that time was probably like 9 years old, and he let him behind the merch table, hang out with him, and sell merch with him. When Leo
awesome.
Sparrow did, yeah, he holds a little place in my heart. Love me some Leo Sparrow. But that's a prime example of, and they called it legitimately homecoming. MJF came in, and there's been some articles on some of maybe the regular sheets that you follow the fans do, and that news has been kind of circulating. So a guy like Boys and Girls, he's a real guy. He's not just this, But I kind of wanted to spin back on when you see a guy like Mustafa Ali. We see him as a fan on TV as a character. You don't see the regimen that he does in the gym. And when you see a guy like Mustafa Ali that's come out of this WWE era right now, who's still active, very active, and you see these guys and girls train, they will absolutely blow your mind because it's like, wait, that's Mustafa Ali? Yeah, man, that guy can go. You just have no idea because they
Yeah,
put these characters in front of us, and you just don't
yeah.
understand how amazingly athletic and what it really takes for these boys and girls, men and women, in the gym. And watching these guys and girls do that stuff, oh, unreal, man, unreal.
Oh yeah. Usually it starts with me once I'm done shaking the person next to me going like, "Oh my God," right? It's like, yeah, when you actually see them in training do drills or like
Yeah,
and I think part of that is too is like unfortunately like TV is what it is, right? Like so some of the matches are like 3 minutes long and it's like, oh, you don't get
right.
to really see anything. But when you like I don't know if people understand like how much work it takes to get to their level. The like we talked about earlier, like figuring out the balance, like the road miles, the you know the amount of training, the weight room, watching tapes, like studying, how much you think about it, like and obviously they have like the performance center or in the biggest places they might have like fitness coaches and like doctors on scene and all that stuff but it's like yeah they earn their spot and it's like I remember what Ali was saying. He's like something along the lines of like, I just wanted to be the most, not like technically sound, but he wanted everything that he did to be like the smoothest, the like, the most snappy, like the timing, all of that. Like, and he worked on it. He said he worked on it for a long time and like it paid off, so it's like the work they put in and just like it shows. Like I've met Dijak a couple times back at Chaotic and stuff, and like I've been told about how great of a mind for wrestling he has, and I've seen him like give feedback and stuff, and even to people. What's wild is when you see someone that you think is on like compared to me, it's like, oh, I'm here and they're like way up here, but then like they go to somebody who's like that to them, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, oh, hey Dijak, you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy, whoever it is who was just in the main event, just asked Dijak for advice. It's like, this is really neat, man. Because in a way we all have a similar, we're all kind of in the same position, but just at different times, right? Like, so that's really,
Exactly.
it's really cool to see. Like, because I'm sure he go like, somebody at like Dijak or Mustafa or like Dango or whoever, they will go to somebody at some point and go, hey, how's my match? Or like, what can I
Right.
do to do, or what do you think I should do when I wrestle this guy? And so it's really neat. It's like, oh, they're just like us, except better or or on a bigger scale or whatever it is. I'll tell you though, like one thing that really, um, man, that really blew my mind. That like, I still don't know if I process like if it's really settled in. But when I went to Chicago for the second time and I was on at the freelance show, I was in the locker room and I'd met this guy a couple times and had many interactions with him. But when I met Colt Cabana as a wrestler, as a peer, even though it was just like, sometimes you're like, I am nothing but dirt below your feet. I just want to say hi, like, but no, a lot of people are cool. And he was really cool to me that night. And that was wild where I remember texting my brother, like right after I was like, hey man, do you mind if can I be like a fan right now? And he
Fan.
was like, go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And we took a picture and I was just like, man, like never in my wildest dreams would I have felt like if you told me before I started training a few years ago, like when I was at wrestling shows, go, why haven't I done this yet? I've acted, I've sang in bands, like I've performed my whole, like most of my life. Why have I not given this a shot? But like that I would have met Colt Cabana in a locker room and not at like a signing or at a show to get his autograph or like, because there's a bunch of different, few different times where, like I said, we used to get front row. There was one time he just threw his ring jacket and just out of instinct, it was coming like right for me. And I just like, I snagged it, but I just caught it, and he all of a sudden he turned and went, thief. And I was like, ooh, so we had these like interactions and there's like another one with like a photo that like back when camera phones weren't really, they were still new and they weren't really like good yet. You would take one photo and it would process. So it was like it was like my first camera phone. And he was, I took a picture of him on the apron. And then right as it was processing, he turned around and saw me and went, and was like, and I was like, oh, because it was processing and he had to hold that pose for like, 20 more seconds. And I finally gave him the thumbs up, like I got it. But to talk to him and be like, hey, I've been watching you for years as a fan and now I'm like a wrestler too. And this is wild. And then he was asking me like why I'm in Chicago because I'm from New England and all this stuff. And that was pretty fun. But like,
Cool.
just like this is if anyone hasn't trained and they're listening to this and like you're like, dude, I at least suggest you give it a shot if you really liked it. Cause like I lived somebody else's life in a way for a very long time. And I lived like somebody else's dream for me, I guess, whatever you want to call that, like square peg, round hole. Like I put my life on hold for a few years, more than a few years. But when you actually put the effort in, like when you dedicate yourself to something you actually love and it starts to work, and even if it doesn't, even if you're like, you know what, man, like I like my job, I have the like maybe you're older and you have some young kids or whatever, but you're like, you know what, I've always wanted to try it. It's fun as hell, man. You should try it. Like the first time I stepped in the ring at New England Pro Wrestling Academy when I signed up, and Smash Master took me in the ring and showed me how to like, run the ropes and stuff. And I remember just like putting my hand on the top rope and just like, oh man, this is real. I'm actually doing it. And then, my brother was like, hey, what was it like? And I was like, remember when we used to wrestle as kids and like do like the beat each other up to the backstage and all that stuff? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, it's exactly like that. And I'm like, dude, it's so cool. It's so much fun, but it hurts a little bit more. But like, no, seriously, like, but like when you actually like put the effort in and like, this probably sounds corny as hell, but like, and put the go into and like start making your dream happen. It's amazing, man. Like life's too short. I lost my nephew at 15 years old. He died to cancer. I'm grateful, not grateful, but I'm lucky enough to have lived longer, twice as long as him now. Like life is too short to not be happy. And, I know it shows when I talk about wrestling, and it always has. I've always been the fan that like, if somebody was like, hey, Don, who's the biggest wrestling fan in your class? Like before you could finish a sentence, they'd be like, him. And they'd point to me. So to finally like follow through with it and do it and know like it's what like I've always wanted to do it, and it's going well, and I'm making all these new friends, and it's like some of these stories, like I said, don't seem real yet. Like Colt Cabana, that story happened September. It's like I still don't think it happened, and I still don't think it's real. So, and just like a life lesson, man. Like if you're unhappy, you can always change it somehow. You can always change your circumstances some way or another, whether you realize it or not. And the universe for me had to step in to get me out of where I was, but doors opened and I walked through. So just a little bit of life advice, I guess, for people. Like you can make it happen, dude. Like don't think if you're not like in shape or you've never been an athlete a day in your life or tried a sport. If you want to give it a shot, you can. Just, but you do have to put the work in. This is really hard. It's not for everybody,
Right.
like the, falling on the mat can hurt when you do it really wrong, or like when you do it right, it still hurts, but like not as bad. It's like, so, but like seriously, like if you're thinking about it, do some research, find a school, start getting into shape beforehand. Cause you wouldn't want it to deter you if you show up and you're like, man, that was really tough. I feel like I'm going to throw up. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but like, give yourself that, like start, hit the ground running, start working out, like look up exercises on YouTube, whatever. But anyway, so that's that story, I guess. I rambled, but
No, my man, you took us on a little journey because I usually end with a possible road story that the talent can share and whatnot. That Colt
cool.
Cabana thing was absolutely
It was, dude,
perfect. That was absolutely perfect.
The only other one I have, because I haven't met like, I've been doing this for a couple of years, so it's like haven't met a ton of people. But one thing I'm extremely grateful for that was another one of those, this came full circle, is Jimmy Rave.
Okay.
I would hold on to streamers at Ring of Honor shows to throw for him. When everybody would either throw toilet paper, he was just, I would like, my brother would collect the DVDs, and normally if I had enough time, I would watch the whole DVD, but usually to get me to pick one, I would look on the back and see who Jimmy was wrestling. He was just my favorite. And unfortunately he passed away, but timing kind of happened where he did a seminar on like Zoom. I think it was based in England, but I got to do that seminar. And there was only a few of us in there, but he kept asking me questions in a way like, hey, Scott, can I use you again? And I was like, yeah, like, holy crap. Like, just again, I like my brother's my first go-to to text when something crazy happened,
Yeah.
because wrestling was always, it's what got us through so much. And like, it's the thing that always binded us together. And we got into it together because of a pair of shoes I bought as a kid. I can tell that on another episode if you want, but, but like, that one was like so cool. And then for him to pass away not long after was like, he was on my list of like, every wrestler kind of has a list. It's like, dude, if I could wrestle these, like you have the guys that are happening right now, like, oh, I wish I could wrestle like Keegan or like Bobby Orlando or whoever, right? And like, but then you have your guys like your dream, like, okay, if I could use a wish from a genie, dude, Jimmy Rave would have been on that. Or like, if I could get in the embassy, would be like, my brain would probably explode if I ever had Prince Nana managing me. But like, but to have that moment with Jimmy where he even like, not just to sit and listen, but him to go, hey Scott, can I use you again? I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I felt like it was like the fanboy moment of just like, ah, hitting new octaves on your voice and stuff. Like, oh my God. So,
But these are the things you've shared with us from your
yeah.
heart, and I can't even thank you enough for all of your beautiful, beautiful stories, um, from the training. And there, I mean, we could talk for like 3, 4, 5 more hours. But if
Let's
I
do
do that, well,
it. If
but
the
then if
fans
I
want
do
it.
that, we're gonna get it all in one sitting. We would
Mhm.
want the return of a Sigma,
Yeah.
and we're gonna
Okay.
start the next episode, the sequel of. We're gonna start with the story of the shoe sneaker with you and your brother. Is that what's going on there? You
Yeah.
said okay.
Yes. Yep.
We will start right there when we have the return of Sigma, because boys and girls, we've talked for almost an hour and a half. I love Sigma. Look at him. He's gorgeous. First off, second off,
Ah!
he talks he talks wrestling with passion and emotion, just like we do. And I love this guy, and I am so glad that we connected so he can talk to us, the fans. I can't even believe that we got to. I was expecting, I can start doing this a little bit. Most of the time, I expect the talent to kind of hang up on me at about the 20-minute mark. But we're
No way,
here at almost an hour and a half.
man.
And I can't thank you for
I
taking some
warned you.
time
I
out of.
warned you I can talk.
I thank you for taking the time out of your life to share with us, the fans. I can't even appreciate it enough, my man.
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks for having. I would love to do this again. I love this type of stuff. Like, getting
Is
to know
this one
people
of?
and vice versa.
Yeah.
I'm a people person, man. Like,
Do you do the podcasting much?
no, this is the first podcast I've done since becoming a wrestler. The only other one I did was my friend was doing one, and they wanted me to help them tell them about Wrestle Kingdom that was coming up. So this is my debut. Another
Yes.
debut. Yes.
Yes. We love first, boys and girls, don't we? Yes. Thank you for choosing STP as a platform, my man, to be the first. I really do appreciate that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Johnny Pierce recommended it, man. I know he did the show recently, and he was like, dude, he put it over. He's like, you got to do it. And I was like, I didn't know it was a thing. And I apologize for that, but I was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
No,
So.
no, that's okay. But like I said, I'm in Connecticut, and most of the people I speak to are states away, and I can only go to so many shows. So it's not like I'm doing the 2-hour drives anymore like I used to, going to
Right.
Rhode Island and the further places in Massachusetts and New York
Yeah.
and such. So I don't get to see as many people as I would like. So for Mr. Pierce to put me over like that makes me want to cry. I love Johnny Pierce, except when we're at the shows and he wants to like take his foot and stick it up my ass. That's a different
Yeah.
story.
He gets grumpy at shows, and it's like,
Yeah.
if I don't eat enough at shows, I get hangry and I take it out on my opponents, and then I have to tell the kids like, no, like, I had a bite, I'm good now, so.
So how we usually kind of bring this all to a tail end is a story, which we've gotten many of, and those last couple, absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing. But we want the details. How do we find Sigma? The Twitter, the face page, the Pornhub, the YouTube, whatever you've got.
Most of my stuff is under Sigma's Hungry, one way or another. Sometimes there's an underscore. I can't keep track of that. Like I said, I'm not the best with social media, but yeah, if you type in Sigma's Hungry and either Instagram, Twitter, you'll see that. I put up clips when I get them. I put up photos. I usually put up my schedule, or I usually retweet like my friends' things or like shows I'm going to be on, that type of thing. I haven't really there are some things in the work with a friend of mine that I used to work with him in the TV days when I did like public access TV and stuff. We might be having some video content in the works,
Okay.
but you know, life is life, and he has 2 young kids, so it may not be an all the time thing. So, but we have some ideas, and
That's cool.
but otherwise, it's like a lot of photos and sometimes a promo, that type of thing, and you know, so yeah. And if anyone wants to reach out, or you know, usually I respond once in a while, like when I can, like direct messages, or if you put a comment, that's, you know, I like positivity though, please. So we try to keep it fun and positive, and I'm a big goof, so a lot of things are just, you'll see a lot of references and things I post, and I hope people catch those references because that makes me happy. And
Boys and girls, we started this one with video games. We're going to start the follow-up with a story of a shoe, a sneaker, if you will. We're going to see what that's all about. I can't wait. So what we're going to do is let a little bit of time, maybe 4, 5, 6 months go by, see where Mr. Sigma's at in his career.
yes.
Hopefully he's not in Japan already, and we can get him on here, okay?
Let's hope.
Don't be going to Japan without talking to us, okay?
I won't.
Right.
I'll
Okay.
if I'm getting into Japan, I'll let you know. We'll do a podcast.
Yes.
We'll
Hit
do
me up
we'll
on
do
the
an
old,
episode.
yes, please do so. All right, you've been amazing, my friend. Absolutely love you taking the time. Boys and girls, yet another fine talent. I've only met him for 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes at a show. And look at the conversation we just had here. An hour and a half with Mr. Sigma. Yes, that's what we do. Yes, that's what we do. This is Stirring the Pot with Don Kincaid with our very special guest, Sigma. Thank you so much, my man. Thank you.
Thank you.